Back in the 1970s, feeding a big family meant getting creative with every dollar. With prices climbing and paychecks staying the same, home cooks across America turned simple ingredients into meals that could stretch to feed 6, 8, or even 10 hungry mouths. Today we're exploring 25 cheap meals from the 1970s that fed big families without any fancy stuff. Let's start with meatloaf. This was the ultimate budget stretcher that graced dinner tables across America throughout the 70s. A single pound of ground beef could feed an entire family when you knew how to work with it. The secret was in what you added to make that meat go further. Breadcrumbs were the most common extender, but resourceful cooks used everything from crushed crackers to oatmeal to leftover rice. Some families stretched it even further by adding finely grated vegetables like carrots or zucchini, which also kept the loaf moist. Ground beef in 1970 cost about 89 cents a pound, which would be around $6 today. But with all those fillers, that single pound became enough protein for the whole family. The aroma of meatloaf baking in the oven meant dinner was coming, and that tomato or ketchup glaze on top became caramelized and sweet. Served with mashed potatoes and canned green beans, this was a complete meal that cost just a couple of dollars to make. Many families had their own secret ingredient, whether it was a packet of onion soup mix, a splash of Worcestershire sauce, or a handful of bell peppers. Leftovers made incredible sandwiches the next day, so nothing went to waste. Sloppy Joes. If there was ever a meal that kids begged for in the 1970s, it was Sloppy Joes. This messy, delicious sandwich was the answer to every parent's weeknight dinner dilemma. Brown a pound of ground beef with some onions, add tomato sauce or ketchup, maybe a little mustard and brown sugar, and you had a meal in under 30 minutes. The name said it all because eating these sandwiches was a gloriously messy experience. Kids didn't mind the sauce dripping down their chins and onto their plates. Hamburger buns were cheap, often just 40 cents a package, and one batch of the meat mixture could easily fill 8 to 10 buns. Some cooks added a can of tomato soup to stretch it even further. The sweet and tangy flavor profile made this a hit with children who might otherwise be picky eaters. Schools even served their own version in cafeterias, though most kids agreed that Mom's homemade version was better. This was the kind of meal where seconds were expected and the pot was always scraped clean. Macaroni and cheese. The blue box with the powdered cheese became an icon of 70s family cooking. Kraft macaroni and cheese had been around since 1937, but it truly hit its stride in the 70s when budgets got tight. At just 19 cents a box in the early part of the decade, it was one of the cheapest meals you could put on the table. But homemade versions were popular too, especially in households where scratch cooking was still the norm. A block of Velveeta or American cheese, some elbow macaroni, butter, and milk created a creamy, comforting dish that kids devoured. Some families baked their mac and cheese with breadcrumbs on top for a crispy crust. Others added cut-up hot dogs to make it more filling. The beauty of macaroni and cheese was its versatility. It could be a main dish, a side dish, or even lunch the next day, eaten cold straight from the refrigerator. For families with multiple children, a double batch was standard, and there were rarely any leftovers. This simple combination of pasta and cheese represented comfort in its purest form. Tuna casserole. Canned tuna was a pantry staple that cost almost nothing and could be transformed into a filling family meal. The classic tuna casserole combined egg noodles, a can or two of tuna, and cream of mushroom soup into something greater than the sum of its parts. Campbell's cream of mushroom soup was practically a food group in 70s cooking, appearing in countless casserole recipes. For tuna casserole, it provided the creamy base that held everything together. Frozen peas added color and nutrition, while crushed potato chips or breadcrumbs on top provided that essential crunch. A can of tuna cost about 35 cents, the soup was around 20 cents, and a bag of egg noodles was similarly affordable. The entire dish could feed a family of 6 for under $2. Some cooks added hard-boiled eggs or celery for extra texture. The casserole went into the oven until it bubbled around the edges and the topping turned golden brown. That first scoop released a cloud of steam and the promise of a satisfying meal. It wasn't fancy, but it was filling, economical, and genuinely delicious in that homey 70s way. Beef stew. When autumn winds started blowing, beef stew season officially began. This was a meal that could simmer all afternoon, filling the house with an aroma that made everyone eager for dinner. The beauty of beef stew was that it used the cheapest cuts of meat, the tough, chewy pieces that became tender and flavorful after hours of slow cooking. Chuck roast or stew meat cubes cost far less than steaks or roasts, and the long cooking time broke down the connective tissue into silky, rich gravy. Potatoes, carrots, onions, and celery were the traditional vegetables, all of which were incredibly affordable. A large pot of stew could feed a family for 2 or even 3 dinners. Some cooks added a splash of red wine or Worcestershire sauce for depth. Others swore by a tablespoon of tomato paste. Served with crusty bread to sop up the gravy, this was the kind of meal that warmed you from the inside out. The leftovers often tasted even better the next day, as the flavors continued to meld together. Chili. A big pot of chili could feed an army, and in the 70s, many families felt like they were feeding one. This Texas-born dish had spread across the country and adapted to regional tastes and budget constraints. The basic formula of ground beef, beans, tomatoes, and chili powder could be stretched to feed as many people as needed. Some purists insisted that real chili had no beans, but budget-conscious cooks knew that kidney beans or pinto beans made the pot go further. A pound of dried beans cost pennies and provided protein and fiber. Canned tomatoes, onions, and garlic rounded out the base. The spice level could be adjusted for families with young children or cranked up for those who liked it hot. Chili was often served with cornbread, which was another incredibly cheap side dish. Saltine crackers, shredded cheese, and diced onions made popular toppings. One batch could provide dinner plus lunches for several days. Fried rice. Nothing went to waste in a 70s kitchen, and fried rice was the perfect example of this frugal philosophy. Day-old rice that might otherwise be thrown away became the foundation for a complete meal. The key was using cold, leftover rice because fresh rice would turn mushy. A hot skillet or wok, some oil, beaten eggs, and whatever vegetables were on hand transformed yesterday's side dish into tonight's dinner. Frozen peas and carrots were common additions, as were diced celery and green onions. Leftover meat of any kind could be chopped and added, whether it was roast beef, pork, chicken, or even Spam. A splash of soy sauce provided the savory umami flavor that tied everything together. Chinese restaurants had popularized this dish, but home cooks discovered it was incredibly easy to make. The total cost was essentially just the eggs and vegetables, since the rice was already paid for. Kids loved the combination of flavors and textures, and parents loved that it used up leftovers. This was practical, delicious cooking at its finest. Spaghetti with meat sauce. Italian-American cooking had become thoroughly mainstream by the 70s, and spaghetti night was a weekly tradition in millions of homes. A box of spaghetti cost about 30 cents, and a pound of ground beef stretched across the whole pot of sauce. Some families used jarred sauce like ragu or prego, which had become widely available. Others made sauce from scratch using canned tomatoes, tomato paste, garlic, and Italian seasonings. The meat was browned with onions, then simmered in the tomato sauce until the flavors melded together. A 1-pound box of pasta could easily serve 6 to 8 people when portioned appropriately. Garlic bread made from a regular loaf of bread, butter, and garlic powder was the traditional accompaniment. A simple green salad with Italian dressing completed the meal. The whole dinner could be prepared for just a few dollars, making it one of the most economical family meals of the decade. Children who were picky about vegetables would eat tomato sauce without complaint, getting their nutrition without realizing it. Beef and bean burritos. Mexican food had begun its takeover of American kitchens, and homemade burritos were an affordable way to feed a crowd. Ground beef stretched with refried beans created a filling that was both satisfying and economical. A can of refried beans cost about 25 cents and could double the amount of filling. Flour tortillas were becoming more widely available outside the Southwest, though some families still made their own. The beef was seasoned with cumin, chili powder, garlic, and onion. Shredded cheese melted on top while the burrito was still warm. Salsa, sour cream, and shredded lettuce provided additional toppings for those who wanted them. The assembly line approach worked well for big families, where everyone could customize their own burrito. Leftovers of the meat and bean mixture could be used the next day for taco salads or nachos. This was the kind of versatile, crowd-pleasing meal that became a family favorite and stayed in the rotation for generations. Cabbage rolls. Eastern European immigrants had brought this dish to America, and it remained popular in many regions throughout the 70s. Cabbage was one of the cheapest vegetables available, often just 10 or 15 cents a head. The leaves were softened in boiling water, then stuffed with a mixture of ground beef, rice, and seasonings. Tomato sauce covered the rolls as they baked, creating a tangy, sweet coating. A single head of cabbage could produce a dozen or more rolls, easily feeding a large family. The dish required some time and effort to prepare, making it a weekend project for many home cooks. But the results were worth it. The soft, tender cabbage wrapped around the savory filling created a perfect bite. Many families made double batches and froze half for later. This was old-world cooking that suited the budget-conscious 70s perfectly. The combination of inexpensive cabbage, cheap ground beef, and economical rice made this a winner for families watching every penny. Baked ziti. Italian-American comfort food reached its peak with baked ziti, a dish that could feed a crowd with minimal effort. Ziti pasta, which got its name from the Italian word for bridegroom because it was traditionally served at weddings, was the foundation. The pasta was cooked, then layered with marinara sauce, ricotta cheese, and mozzarella. Some versions included Italian sausage or ground beef for extra protein. The whole thing went into the oven until it bubbled, and the cheese on top turned golden and slightly crispy. A large baking dish could serve 10 or 12 people, making this ideal for family gatherings or Sunday dinners. The ingredients were all affordable, especially when you caught sales on cheese or made your own sauce. Leftovers reheated beautifully, making this a gift that kept on giving. The dish satisfied both kids who loved the cheesy pasta and adults who appreciated the deeper flavors of the sauce and seasonings, hot dogs and beans. Sometimes the simplest meals were the most beloved, and hot dogs with baked beans fit that description perfectly. A package of hot dogs cost about 79 cents for 8 or 10 francs. A large can of baked beans was similarly affordable. Together, they created a meal that kids adored and parents could prepare in minutes. The hot dogs could be boiled, grilled, or pan-fried, then served alongside or on top of the beans. Some cooks sliced the hot dogs into coins and stirred them right into the beans. A little mustard, ketchup, or relish on the side completed the experience. This wasn't gourmet cooking, but it was honest, filling food that didn't pretend to be anything it wasn't. Cookouts and picnics featured this combination throughout the summer months. During winter, it was a quick weeknight dinner that required minimal cleanup. For families with multiple hungry children, this was a reliable standby that never disappointed. Potato soup. When money was especially tight, potato soup could stretch a few dollars into a filling meal for the whole family. Potatoes were among the cheapest vegetables available, often just a few cents per pound when bought in large bags. The basic recipe called for potatoes, onions, butter, and milk or cream. Some versions added celery or carrots for extra nutrition. The potatoes were peeled, cubed, and simmered until tender, then partially mashed to thicken the soup. A chunk of butter and a splash of milk created the creamy base. Cheese could be stirred in for extra richness, and bacon bits provided a smoky, salty garnish. A loaf of bread on the side made this a complete meal. The entire pot might cost less than $2 to prepare, yet it filled everyone up and left them satisfied. This was the kind of cooking that got families through tough times, proving that delicious meals didn't require expensive ingredients. Pasta Primavera. Despite its fancy Italian name, Pasta Primavera was simply pasta with vegetables, and it was remarkably affordable to make at home. The dish had actually been invented in America, not Italy, but it captured the lighter, fresher approach to Italian cooking that was becoming popular. Any combination of vegetables could be used, depending on what was in season or on sale. Broccoli, zucchini, bell peppers, peas, and carrots were common choices. The vegetables were sautéed in olive oil or butter with garlic, then tossed with hot pasta. A sprinkle of Parmesan cheese and a little pasta water brought the dish together. This was an excellent way to get children to eat their vegetables because everything was coated in delicious flavors. For families who wanted a meatless meal to save money, this fit the bill perfectly. The vegetable quantities could be adjusted based on what needed to be used up, making this a flexible, practical choice for budget-conscious cooks. Egg salad sandwiches. Eggs were one of the most affordable protein sources in the 1970s, costing about 60 cents a dozen. Egg salad turned this humble ingredient into a satisfying sandwich filling that could feed the whole family. Hard-boiled eggs were chopped and mixed with mayonnaise, a little mustard, salt, and pepper. Some cooks added pickle relish, celery, or a touch of onion for extra flavor and crunch. The mixture was spread generously on bread, often white bread from the grocery store bakery. A dozen eggs could make sandwiches for 4 to 6 people with plenty of egg salad left over. This was a popular lunch option that required no cooking beyond boiling the eggs. It packed well in lunch boxes and traveled easily to picnics and potlucks. The simplicity of the ingredients belied how satisfying a good egg salad sandwich could be, especially when made with love and served with a handful of potato chips, fried chicken, and mashed potatoes. Sunday dinner often meant fried chicken, and smart shoppers knew how to make this special meal affordable. Buying a whole chicken and cutting it up yourself cost far less than purchasing individual pieces. A whole fryer might cost $1.50 and provide enough pieces for a family of 6. The chicken was dredged in seasoned flour, then fried in a cast-iron skillet filled with oil or shortening. The golden, crispy coating gave way to juicy, flavorful meat inside. Mashed potatoes stretched the meal further, and the pan drippings made incredible gravy. Add a vegetable side like green beans or corn, and you had a feast that felt like a celebration. Fried chicken required some skill and attention, but the results were worth the effort. Leftovers were eaten cold for lunch the next day, often considered just as good as the fresh fried version. This meal represented the best of home cooking, turning simple ingredients into something truly special. Tater tot casserole. Frozen convenience foods had changed American cooking, and tater tots found their way into one of the decade's most beloved casseroles. This dish combined everything kids loved into one baking dish. Ground beef formed the base, seasoned and browned with onions. A can of cream of mushroom soup created the binding layer. Shredded cheese added richness and flavor. Then came the crown of tater tots, arranged in neat rows across the top. As the casserole baked, the tots turned crispy and golden, while the layers beneath became bubbly and delicious. The entire dish cost just a couple of dollars to make and disappeared quickly at the dinner table. Some families added corn or green beans between the meat and potato layers. Others experimented with different soups or cheese varieties. But the classic version remained the favorite, a perfect example of 70s comfort food that satisfied both children and adults. Creamed tuna on toast. Canned tuna appeared again in this simple, economical dish that graced breakfast and dinner tables alike. Creamed tuna on toast was essentially a white sauce with tuna, served over toasted bread. The sauce came together quickly from butter, flour, milk, and seasonings. A can of tuna was drained and stirred into the creamy mixture. Some cooks added peas for color and nutrition. The toast provided a crispy base that soaked up the sauce. This dish cost pennies to make and could be prepared in 15 minutes or less. It was often served when grocery shopping day was still a few days away and the pantry was running low. The combination of protein from the tuna, carbohydrates from the toast, and calcium from the milk made it reasonably nutritious. While it might not win any culinary awards, it was honest, filling food that solved the eternal question of what to make for dinner. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. No list of cheap family meals would be complete without the iconic peanut butter and jelly sandwich. This American classic required just 3 ingredients: bread, peanut butter, and jelly or jam, and could be assembled in seconds. A jar of peanut butter cost about 80 cents and lasted for dozens of sandwiches. Grape jelly was the traditional choice, though strawberry jam had its devoted fans. White bread was the standard base, soft and slightly sweet. The sandwiches could be cut diagonally into rectangles or with the crusts removed for picky eaters. This was lunch for millions of school children packed into brown bags or lunch boxes every morning. But it also served as a quick dinner when time or money was short. The combination of protein from the peanut butter and quick energy from the jelly and bread made it surprisingly sustaining. Some families ate peanut butter and jelly sandwiches multiple times per week without complaint because they were simply that satisfying. Chicken and rice. A whole chicken could feed a family for multiple meals when prepared thoughtfully. Chicken and rice made the most of this economical protein by simmering everything together in one pot. The chicken was browned first to develop flavor, then braised with rice, broth, and seasonings until everything was tender. The rice absorbed the cooking liquid and the flavors from the chicken, becoming incredibly savory. Some versions added vegetables like peas, carrots, or celery. Others kept it simple with just onion and garlic. The dish was filling, nutritious, and extremely affordable. A whole chicken and a bag of rice together cost less than $3. The leftovers could be transformed into chicken salad or soup the next day. This was practical, economical cooking that wasted nothing and satisfied everyone. Generations of families relied on this dish to stretch their food budgets while still eating well. Potato and leek soup. Similar to plain potato soup, but with more sophisticated flavor, potato and leek soup was a European import that suited American budgets perfectly. Leeks were more expensive than onions, but still affordable, and their mild, sweet flavor elevated the soup. The vegetables were sliced and sautéed in butter until soft, then simmered with potatoes in chicken or vegetable broth. Once everything was tender, the soup could be left chunky or pureed until smooth. A splash of cream added richness, though milk worked fine for budget versions. This soup was particularly popular during cold weather months when warming, filling meals were most appreciated. The recipe could easily be doubled or tripled to feed a crowd. Served with crusty bread, it became a complete meal that cost very little to prepare. The gentle, savory flavor appealed to both children and adults, making this a family-friendly option. Casserole with leftovers. The ultimate expression of 70s frugality was the anything-goes casserole made from whatever leftovers were in the refrigerator. Leftover roast beef, chicken, or ham could be combined with vegetables, pasta, or rice. A can of cream soup bound everything together, and cheese or breadcrumbs on top provided the finishing touch. These casseroles were different every time, depending on what needed to be used up. The creative challenge was making all the elements work together, and experienced home cooks developed an instinct for what combinations would succeed. Some of these improvised dishes became family favorites and were recreated intentionally. Others were one-time experiments, delicious, but never quite duplicated. The point was that nothing edible went to waste. In an era before widespread awareness of food waste, these casseroles were simply practical cooking. They represented the resourcefulness that defined home cooking in the 1970s. Baked beans and cornbread. This combination had roots in American history going back centuries, and it remained a budget-friendly staple in the 70s. Canned baked beans were inexpensive and filling, especially the varieties that included bits of pork or bacon. Heating them with a little extra brown sugar and mustard improved the flavor. Cornbread was equally economical, made from cornmeal, flour, eggs, and milk. Some families preferred sweet cornbread, while others liked it savory. Either version complemented the beans beautifully. A large pan of cornbread and a pot of beans could feed 6 to 8 people for just a couple of dollars. The meal was satisfying and provided plenty of protein and carbohydrates. Adding a simple coleslaw or green salad on the side made it even more complete. This was comfort food with deep American roots, perfect for families who needed to stretch their grocery dollars. Grilled cheese and tomato soup. The perfect pairing of grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup became a beloved combination that defined comfort food for many families. The sandwiches were simple but perfect when made well. Butter on the outside of the bread, American cheese inside, and cooked in a skillet until golden and crispy with melted cheese oozing from the edges. Campbell's tomato soup was the traditional accompaniment, often made with milk instead of water for a creamier texture. The combination of the crunchy, cheesy sandwich dunked into the warm, tangy soup created a taste experience that was greater than either component alone. This meal cost almost nothing to prepare, but delivered satisfaction that far exceeded its price. It was equally appropriate for lunch or dinner, for children or adults. On cold, rainy days, there were few meals more comforting than this classic American combination. Macaroni salad. Rounding out our journey through 70s, budget cooking is macaroni salad, a dish that appeared at every picnic, potluck, and family gathering. Elbow macaroni was cooked, cooled, and dressed with mayonnaise, mustard, and various crunchy additions. Celery, bell peppers, and onions were common ingredients. Some versions included hard-boiled eggs or pickle relish. The salad could be made in large quantities for very little money, making it ideal for feeding crowds. It traveled well without refrigeration for short periods, important for outdoor events. The creamy, tangy dressing coated each piece of pasta, and the vegetables provided pleasant crunch and color. Macaroni salad could serve as a side dish, or, with enough protein additions, a main course. It represented the practical, economical approach to cooking that defined the decade. Every family had their own version, passed down and adjusted over generations. Thanks for joining us on this trip down memory lane. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like and share it with a friend. And don't forget to subscribe.